People often praise open world games for the sense of freedom. These games offer large areas to explore, let players make choices, and create the feeling that almost anything is possible. Unlike linear games, open worlds seem less controlled and more lively. However, this freedom raises an important question. If a game allows players to break laws, harm others, or ignore social rules and then rewards them, what does that teach players about how society works? Games like Grand Theft Auto 5 and Cyberpunk 2077 are some of the most popular open world games ever made. Even though they're rated for adults, they're widely played by teenagers and even younger players. These players aren't just watching stories unfold, they're actively taking part in systems that simulate how power, violence, and consequences work in a society. This video argues that open world games shape young players' expectations of social norms not through their stories, but through their systems. In other words, it's not what these games say that matters most, it's what they let players do and what they reward them for doing. When people talk about games influencing players, the conversation usually focuses on story or more commonly the violence. But that misses something important. These systems show players how the world works by rewarding certain actions and ignoring others. So the real question isn't what these games say about society, it's what they teach players to expect from it. Game designer and researcher Jesper Joao talks about using a simple idea, the difference between rules, aka system, and fiction. Fiction being the story, characters and themes, and rules being the systems in video games, aka the mechanics, what you're allowed to do, what gets rewarded, and what gets punished. Both are equally as important, but when you're actually playing, rules usually have more influence than the story itself. You might understand what a game is trying to say, but you still only play in the way the system permits it. To see how this works, let's look at these specific games for example, starting with GTA 5. To cut it short, it's often described as satire. Its world greatly exaggerates violence, greed, and corruption to make fun of modern society. And looking at it plainly, it's true. But the problem is that the game systems don't really support that description. Violence earns money, crime progresses the story, police are just simple hurdles, not a lasting force. A big example of all of this is the heist missions. These are some of the most memorable moments of the game. They're cinematic and heavily rewarded. Planning large-scale robberies, manipulating people, and escaping from the law isn't treated as reckless, but as smart gameplay. One massive problem with this is with repetition comes normalization. Many children idolize that adult life and want to get up to all the forbidden things that adults get up to. However, in the early stages of development, GTA 5 can open a lot of doors to this world, or just a concept of that world. Many news outlets report a burst of angry or concerned parents opening up to the fact that games such as GTA 5 and Cyberpunk are absolutely not a game a child in the age of 8 to 16 shouldn't be playing. Cyberpunk 2077, however, takes a different approach. Instead of satire, it presents a dark future created by extreme capitalism, corporate power, and social inequality. The game clearly wants the player to see this world as broken, but despite this framing, the player's role inside the game is very limited. Progress comes almost entirely from taking contracts, completing violent jobs, and working for powerful figures, working your way up to the top of the food chain. One of the most influential characters you work alongside with is Johnny Silverhand, a rebellious, charismatic figure who encourages aggression, individualism, and extreme destruction. Johnny isn't presented as a perfect role model, but he is rewarded by the system to the point where even the game rarely allows the player to fully reject his influence. Like GTA 5, the issue isn't what the game says, but what it allows. You can customize your character and abilities, but you can't meaningfully change the system itself. violence is still the main solution. For young players, this creates a different kind of normalization. Instead of learning that breaking rules is fun, the game teaches that broken systems are unavoidable. Let's look at the social learning theory, how behavior is learned through observation. To understand why games systems matter so much, it helps to look briefly at how people learn behavior in general. Psychologist Albert Bandura introduced what is known as the social learning theory. Bandura argued that people don't just learn through rules or punishment, instead they learn by watching, remembering and repeating behaviors that seem effective and rewarded. This process is often explained using 4 stages of the social learning theory chart. Number 1 being attention. For learning to happen, a player has to notice a behavior in the first place. In video games, this happens constantly. Open world games are designed to draw attention to certain actions, combat, dialogue, rewards, etc. These are behaviors the game constantly highlights as important. Number 2 being retention. Video games are especially strong here because they rely on repetition. Players will always be performing the same types of actions again and again, like in-game mechanics, chases, contracts. Over time, this all becomes embedded into muscle memory and knowledge that influences how players interact with the game. Number 3. Motor reproduction. As mentioned before, this is the act of constant repetition till the point of pure muscle memory. In video games, this is immediate. This doesn't mean players copied those actions in real life, but it does mean the behavior becomes normalized within the system of the game. And last but not least, motivation. A massive necessity in a category as complex as open world games. This is where video game systems become influential. Games constantly motivate the player to progress into the game, whether that's through combat, story-rich world building, or simply the great feeling of success. If a game rewards violent or antisocial behavior, that behavior becomes ultimately and positively reinforced. Conclusion. So when an open world game gives you freedom, that freedom isn't always guaranteed. Where GTA 5 teaches that chaos works and consequences disappear, Cyberpunk 2077 teaches that systems are broken but unavoidable. In both cases, the lesson doesn't come from dialogue or cutscenes, it comes from straight up repetition. Understanding the difference between system and story helps explain how open world games influence players,